This analysis of the agribusiness sector is grounded in the academic framework developed by Dr. Solomon Galetta at Lincoln University of Missouri. It is easy to picture the origins of our food as a quiet, isolated farm, but bridging the gap between a harvested field and a fully stocked retail shelf requires a hyper-complex, multi-trillion-dollar logistical engine. Operating within this system requires viewing every decision through four specific management lenses: efficiency, coordination, differentiation, and risk management. These are not abstract concepts. If a firm fails to optimize even one of these variables, if coordination slips and a shipment delays, or risk management fails during a price spike, the physical chain breaks and already thin profit margins disappear. The raw agricultural market is defined by inherent chaos, rapid spoilage, and extreme price volatility. Mastering this step-by-step chain is the only mechanism the global economy has to stabilize that turbulence.
This maps the value chain's 5 steps. It begins with the production agriculture node, feeding directly into assembly and transportation. From there, materials enter an industrialized phase, processing and manufacturing. Finally, goods move through wholesaling before branching into retailing or food service. Economic value does not organically materialize as goods move down this line. It is actively engineered at every single physical handoff between these nodes. To understand the power dynamics of the modern food sector, we have to dissect exactly how wealth is extracted at these friction points. The clearest place to see this engineering is right in the middle of the chain. Processors generate wealth through a mechanism called form utility. Form utility is the act of creating economic value by forcefully changing a raw commodity's physical state into something more useful. Take a highly volatile raw crop like soybeans. A processor takes that single seed and splits it into 2 entirely distinct, stable products: soybean oil for cooking and soybean meal for livestock feed. That physical transformation anchors the largest sector of value-added wealth in the entire food chain. This pie chart illustrates the composition of processing value added. Notice that meat processing dominates the sector, taking up a massive 22% of the total area. The next largest categories are beverages at 15%, followed closely by bakery products at 11%. Combine just those 3 categories, and they account for nearly half of all the value generated in the entire food processing sector. Form utility serves as the primary financial defense mechanism for processors, stabilizing margins against the volatility of raw commodity markets. Moving down the chain brings us to the logistics layer. Here, survival relies entirely on moving massive physical volumes on razor-thin margins. The foundational economic metric used to calculate this physical work is the ton-mile. A ton-mile measures the movement of 1 ton of freight over a distance of 1 mile. The math is straightforward. If a single truck hauls a 25-ton payload of wheat a distance of 200 miles, that single trip generates 5,000 ton-miles of economic output. Scale that single truck equation up to account for the millions of tons moving across entire continental rail and barge networks simultaneously. Entering this space requires staggering fixed costs. Operators must build and maintain heavy industrial infrastructure, like massive concrete terminal elevators and dedicated rail loading facilities. Because these extreme infrastructure costs are locked in, profitability depends entirely on relentless speed and maximizing the utilization of every available cubic foot of space. This node operates with almost zero margin for error. A sudden spike in rail rates or a single delayed barge on a river system can instantly wipe out a company's profit for the quarter. In the assembly and transportation node, hyper-efficiency is a strict requirement for solvency. It is the only reliable hedge against total financial ruin. Next is the most critical, yet least visible, middleman in the entire system, the wholesaler. Their core physical function is known as breaking bulk. Breaking bulk is the process of taking massive, homogeneous shipments from manufacturers and rapidly dismantling them into smaller quantities. A wholesaler might receive a semi-truck filled with nothing but single-brand ketchup. They break down those pallets and remix the product into thousands of diverse, custom loads tailored to fit the inventory needs of local grocery shelves. Several distinct business models operate here. Merchant wholesalers buy the food outright. They take title to the goods, absorbing all the financial risk if that inventory fails to sell. By contrast, manufacturer sales branch offices, or MSBOs, operate as closed-loop distribution centers. These are owned entirely by the massive food producers themselves to control their own supply lines. The final players are agents and brokers. They act purely as matchmakers, connecting buyers and sellers for a commission without ever owning a single box of the food they move. Wholesalers serve as financial shock absorbers for the food sector. By extending trade credit and absorbing inventory risk, they prevent retail stores from collapsing under cash flow pressure. The final node is the consumer interface. Here, a slow-moving shift in consumer behavior recently triggered a structural change across the entire chain. For decades, the traditional grocery store dominated the market. Americans consistently spent the vast majority of their food dollars on supplies to cook at home. This line chart tracks food spending since 1997. Spending on food at home plateaued, while food away from home steadily crept upward. Then, around 2010, the lines crossed. Food away from home permanently inverted the market, surpassing grocery spending for the first time. The drivers behind this data point are sociological. The rise of dual-career households and extreme time constraints forced a cultural shift that placed a massive premium on convenience. This shift in demand forced a structural overhaul. Processors and wholesalers moved away from grocery optimization to build logistics networks required for food service. The consumer shift toward dining out changed how capital and inventory move through every node of the value chain. The demand for convenience split the traditional retail landscape into dozens of specialized store formats. The store count data illustrates this fracture. Between 2017 and 2021, the number of traditional supermarkets actually suffered a 4% decline. In stark contrast, high-margin, small-footprint convenience stores saw explosive growth, expanding their locations by nearly 17% over the same period. This presents a central paradox. While the physical footprint of the food sector is fragmenting into thousands of smaller pieces, the corporate power controlling it is doing the exact opposite. Economists measure this tightening bottleneck of market power using a metric called the concentration ratio. This visualization compares market share. In 1992, the top 4 grocery firms controlled a modest 16.8% of sales. By 2016, those 4 firms doubled their share to nearly 37%. Look further, and the top 8 firms seized over half the entire market. These mega retailers wield immense oligopsony power, a market condition where a small number of massive buyers dictate terms to a large number of sellers. They use this leverage to abandon open spot markets, forcing suppliers into rigid contracts, or simply acquiring them through vertical integration. In an era dominated by consolidated mega retailers, independent producers face a binary choice. They must achieve massive industrial scale to survive the tightening margins, or abandon the conventional chain entirely to sell their products directly to the consumer.